Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Matt Pierce. I'm a reporter at the Los Angeles Times, and tonight I'm fact-checking the vice presidential debate between Vice President Mike Pence, the Republican, and the Democrat, Senator Kamala Harris from California. We took a look at some of the big moments that we heard at the debate tonight, which will be the only debate between the two vice presidential candidates.
Before, there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China. President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done, and that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical.
Pence is somewhat overstating what Trump did during those early days of the pandemic. You'll remember, a lot of the science wasn't super clear to the public, but there was growing awareness that this virus was spreading in China. It was really dangerous. And so President Trump ordered travel to shut down from mainland China, but that did not apply to, for example, Hong Kong. It also didn't apply to tens of thousands of Americans who were also able to come back from China. So obviously the virus does not acknowledge nationality. It was infecting all sorts of people. And it was not a perfect cordon from preventing the virus coming into the United States. Obviously the virus took foot here. Screening was spotty when travelers came back, and the outbreak took hold in the United States anyway. The day after Trump's announcement, Biden tweeted that, quote, "We need to lead the way with science, not Donald Trump's record of hysteria, xenophobia, and fear-mongering." Biden did not explicitly mention the ban, so it's not entirely clear if he was specifically referring to the ban or just speaking generally about the Trump administration.
President Trump and I have a plan to improve health care and to protect pre-existing conditions for every American.
So if there's a Trump plan to protect insurance coverage for people with pre-existing medical conditions, the public hasn't seen it. Administration lawyers and the coalition of Republican-led states have gone to the Supreme Court trying to strike down the Affordable Care Act. They tried to repeal the law in Congress in 2017. What Trump has done is he signed an executive order on September 24th that promised a commitment to protect individuals with pre-existing conditions. But experts say it doesn't really have any teeth and it doesn't really mean anything. So if the Supreme Court strikes down the Affordable Care Act, some of the assumptions are that the protections for pre-existing conditions would go.
In America, you just heard Senator Harris tell you, on day one, Joe Biden's going to raise your taxes.
Mike Pence challenged Joe Biden's tax plan, which involves a pledge to repeal part of the 2017 tax cut the Trump administration pushed for and got. So Mike Pence said that, quote, "On day one, Joe Biden's going to raise your taxes." So the interesting thing about the 2017 tax law the Trump administration supported and passed is that actually most Americans saw their taxes go down. Most people didn't really know this, especially the liberals. At the time, the law was widely perceived as a giveaway to corporations and wealthy Americans who did see their taxes go down. But Vice President mischaracterized Biden's plan specifically, which would not raise taxes on earners making less than $400,000 a year. Biden would repeal the Trump tax cuts for those making more than that. So it's not a full repeal of that whole tax program.
It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus, in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives.
Mike Pence defended the Trump administration's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic by taking aim at the Obama administration's handling of the 2009 H1N1 swine flu pandemic. That was actually the last pandemic before we had COVID-19. According to the CDC, there were more than 60 million H1N1 cases in 2009 and 2010. And there were little over 12,000 deaths from that pandemic. So obviously it's very different from COVID-19. It was way less deadly. I think it's 0.02% case fatality rate from those numbers from the CDC. Coronavirus, by comparison, right now, according to Johns Hopkins, there's been 7.5 million Americans infected, more than 210,000 Americans killed by COVID-19, which is a fatality rate of about 2.8%. So if you make COVID-19, or you make swine flu as deadly as COVID-19, you actually get something close to about 2 million Americans dead. That's back to the napkin math. The thing is, it's really hard to compare those two responses, because the reason that swine flu infected so many Americans so quickly is because it wasn't deadly. The administration did not shut down the country, didn't close businesses. There were some school shutdowns, but you didn't see the massive response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The closest thing we actually have is the 1918 influenza pandemic. Back then, the science wasn't nearly as good. Scientists didn't really understand the virus very well, but it was so deadly, it killed almost 700,000 Americans.
Joe Biden has refused to answer the question, so I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
Kamala Harris wouldn't answer the question directly whether she and Joe Biden are considering packing the court, which what that means is Congress actually has the power to expand the number of Supreme Court justices that are on the Supreme Court. Right now, it's 8. One of them died, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, recently. Donald Trump has nominated Amy Coney Barrett, a conservative judge, to replace her. And this is something that could decisively tilt the balance of power on the Supreme Court, make it very conservative, the most conservative court in decades. And this has got a lot of Democrats and liberals concerned, because that could affect everything from abortion rights to workers' rights and all sorts of other policy issues that come up in front of the Supreme Court, including the Affordable Care Act. So instead of answering the question, Kamala Harris attacked Republicans for trying to fill the vacancy in the way that they're doing, which is right after Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, right before the election. The Republicans in 2016 famously blocked Barack Obama from selecting a nominee for the Supreme Court when it opened up on a somewhat similar time frame. So there is a lot of sort of politicking happening around this one, and that was a very notable evasion from the Democrats. That's all for me tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for coming to LATimes.com and following our coverage. Please follow us the rest of the campaign as we see who's going to win this race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.